The auction block stank of desperation and unwashed bodies, and Alistair Owens had smelled worse only once before, when he buried his entire regiment after the border massacre that had stolen everything he knew about honor. He stood at the back of the crowd, his weathered hands tucked into the pockets of his worn coat, watching men with soft hands and cruel eyes appraise living flesh like livestock, and felt the familiar burn of disgust rise in his throat. The auctioneer dragged forth a cage on wheels, and inside it hunched a figure that made the crowd erupt in jeering laughter. An orc woman, her green skin marked with old scars and fresh bruises, stared straight ahead with eyes the color of amber caught in firelight. Heavy iron chains bound her wrists and ankles, the metal already chafing raw wounds into her flesh. She wore only rags that had once been clothing, and her black hair hung in matted tangles around her face. Small tusks jutted from her lower jaw, and her pointed ears were notched with what Alistair recognized as clan markings. "What am I bid for this fine specimen?" the auctioneer called out, his voice dripping with mockery. "Strong as an ox, mean as a viper, but broken enough to be useful." "Start the bidding at 5 silver. "I would not pay 5 copper for that beast," someone shouted, and the crowd roared with laughter. "Make her dance in her chains," another voice called. "Let us see what we are buying." The auctioneer grinned and grabbed a long pole, jabbing it through the bars. The orc woman did not flinch, did not cry out, did not give them the satisfaction of a response. She simply stared forward with a dignity that cut through the jeering like a blade through silk. Alistair felt something twist in his chest. He had seen that look before, on the faces of soldiers who knew they were going to die but refused to beg. He had worn that look himself when the enemy had him surrounded, and his sword arm was broken and bleeding. Dignity in the face of certain destruction. It was the most human thing he had ever witnessed, and here it was on the face of someone these fools called a monster. 20 silver, he called out, his voice carrying across the crowd. The laughter died. Heads turned. Did someone actually bid? The auctioneer squinted into the crowd. 20 silver. Well, now we have a buyer. Do I hear 25? Silence. The men who had been so eager to mock were not eager to spend coin. 20 silver going once, going twice, fool's money, someone muttered. Probably wants to work her to death on some failing farm. The auctioneer brought down his gavel. Sold. To the gentleman in the back. Come forward and claim your purchase, sir. Alistair moved through the parting crowd, feeling their eyes on him like flies on meat. He counted out 20 silver coins from his leather purse, half of what he had brought to buy a plow horse, and placed them in the auctioneer's greasy palm. "She is all yours," the man said with a gap-toothed grin. "Careful, though. She bit the last handler, drew blood and everything." "I would have done the same," Alistair said quietly. He approached the cage, and for the first time the orc woman's eyes moved to meet his. Up close, he could see she was younger than he had thought, perhaps no more than 20 summers. Her amber eyes held a universe of pain and rage, and something else, a flicker of surprise, quickly shuddered away. "I am going to open this cage," Alistair said, speaking directly to her. "And then I am going to remove those chains. I am not going to hurt you, do you understand?" She said nothing, but her eyes narrowed slightly. The auctioneer laughed. "She does not talk, that one. Had her tongue cut out, most like." "No," came a rough voice from the cage, startling everyone, including Alistair. "I have my tongue. I simply choose not to waste words on creatures who would not recognize their worth." Her voice was lower than a human woman's, with a gravelly quality that spoke of thirst and disuse, but it was steady and clear. Alistair found himself almost smiling. Almost. He pulled the cage door open. The auctioneer had already handed him the key and stepped inside. The space was barely large enough for the orc woman to crouch, let alone for both of them. He knelt beside her, his joints protesting, and reached for the manacles on her wrists. "Wait," she said sharply. "What is your game, human? Why did you buy me?" "Because no living thing deserves to be caged and mocked," Alistair replied. He produced a small lockpick from his pocket, old habits from his days as a scout, and began working on the first lock. "And because I need help on my farm, and you look like someone who knows how to work hard. You paid 20 silver for a farmhand." Disbelief colored her tone. "I paid 20 silver to get you out of that cage," he corrected. The first lock clicked open and he moved to the second wrist. "What happens after that is up to you." The chains fell away from her wrists with a heavy clatter. Alistair moved to her ankles, and she watched him with an intensity that made him acutely aware of how vulnerable his position was. She could kill him easily at this distance. One good strike and his neck would snap. But she did not move except to rub her raw wrists once they were free. The ankle chains came loose, and Alistair gathered them up, feeling the weight of the iron in his hands. Too heavy. Far too heavy for one person to carry day in and day out. "Can you walk?" he asked. "I can crawl if I must," she replied, her voice sharp with pride. "I will walk." She proved it by standing, though he saw her wince and sway slightly. Alistair steadied her with a hand on her arm. Her skin was surprisingly warm and felt her stiffen at the touch. "My wagon is outside," he said. "It is a half-day's journey to my farm. You can rest in the back. I will not ride in a cage again. It is not a cage, just a wagon bed with hay, open air, open sides. You can jump out any time you want." She studied him for a long moment, then gave a single sharp nod. The crowd parted again as they emerged, Alistair supporting the orc woman's weight, though she tried to hide her limp. He could feel every eye on them, hear every whispered word of disgust and confusion. "You will regret this," someone called. "They are animals, those orcs. She will slit your throat first chance she gets." Alistair did not bother to respond. He had learned long ago that some people would find reasons to hate no matter what truth you spoke. He helped the orc woman into the wagon bed, noting how carefully she positioned herself so she could see in all directions, how her muscles remained tense and ready despite her exhaustion. "There is water in the canteen," he said, pointing to the leather container hanging from the wagon side. "And dried meat in the sack. Help yourself to whatever you need." He climbed onto the driver's bench and took up the reins. His old mare, Bess, nickered softly and started forward at his gentle urging. They left the town behind, and with every mile, Alistair felt the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. They traveled for an hour in silence before he heard movement in the wagon bed behind him. Then her voice, quieter now, uncertain in a way it had not been before. "What is your name, human?" "Alistair Owens. Most people call me Alistair." Another pause. "Why did you really buy me?" He considered his answer carefully. "I told you the truth. I needed help and you needed freedom. Seemed like a fair trade to me. You do not know anything about me. I could be a murderer, a thief. I could be exactly what those humans think I am." "Could be," Alistair agreed, "but I have learned to trust my instincts about people. My instincts say you are someone who has been dealt a bad hand but played it with honor." He heard her make a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. He could not tell which. "I am Farah Forge," she said finally. "Of the northern clans, or I was before." She did not finish, and Alistair did not push. The road wound through rolling hills covered in late spring grass, and the sun climbed higher in a blue sky unmarred by clouds. It was the kind of day that made you believe in second chances, if you were the sort to believe in anything. "Farah," he said, testing the name. "That is a good name." "Strong. It means iron in my tongue, My mother said I came into the world fighting and I never stopped. Fighting is not always about violence, Alistair observed. Sometimes fighting is just refusing to break when everything is trying to break you. He felt her gaze on his back, heavy with consideration. When they stopped at midday to rest the horse, Farah climbed down from the wagon with obvious pain but stubborn determination. She had drunk all the water and eaten the dried meat, and color had returned to her green skin. Up close, in natural light, Alistair could see that she was actually quite striking strong features, high cheekbones, eyes that held depths of intelligence and fire. "Your farm," she said as she stretched carefully. "What kind of work are we talking about?" "Everything," Alistair admitted. "I have 100 acres, mostly wheat and barley, some vegetable gardens, chickens, 3 goats and Bess here. I lost my hired man last harvest. He moved east to the coast for better wages. Been managing alone, but it is too much for one pair of hands. And you think an orc woman can help you?" "I think anyone with a strong back and willing spirit can help me. The question is whether you want to." Farah crossed her arms, and he noticed how the gesture made her look defensive and young at the same time. "What are you offering exactly? Wages? Board?" "Both," Alistair said. "There is a small cottage on the property, used to be for my hired hands. It is yours if you want it, separate from the main house, your own space. As for wages, I can pay you 2 silver a month to start, plus all meals and anything you need for the cottage." 2 silver, she repeated. "That is more than most would pay, I know. But I also know what fair compensation looks like, and I know you will work harder than most because you have something to prove." Her eyes flashed. "I have nothing to prove to you or anyone else." "Not to me," he agreed. "To yourself." That stopped her. She stared at him, and he saw something shift in her expression, a crack in the armor, a glimpse of vulnerability. "Why are you being kind to me?" she asked, and her voice was raw now, stripped of bravado. "Humans do not show kindness to orcs. We are monsters to you. Things to be killed or caged or used up and discarded." Alistair met her eyes steadily. "I served in the border wars for 10 years. I saw things that would turn your stomach. I saw humans do things to orcs that no being should ever do to another, and I saw orcs do the same to humans. I learned that cruelty is not bound by race or species, it is a choice, and so is kindness." He paused, then added quietly, "I also learned that sometimes the only thing standing between survival and destruction is one person who decides to give a damn. Today, I decided to give a damn about you." Farah turned away, but not before he saw her wipe at her eyes. When she turned back, her jaw was set with determination. "I will work for you," she said, "but I keep my freedom. If I decide to leave, I leave. No chains, no contracts, no obligations beyond fair work for fair pay." "Agreed." "And if you try anything, if you touch me in any way I do not want, if you treat me like property instead of a person, I will defend myself, violently if necessary." "I would expect nothing less," Alistair said. "And I give you my word as a former soldier and current farmer that I will never give you reason to." They shook on it, her hand calloused and strong in his, and something like a bargain was struck on that dusty road with the spring sun beating down on them both. The farm appeared as they crested the final hill, a sturdy stone farmhouse with a thatched roof, several outbuildings in good repair, and fields stretching as far as the eye could see. The cottage Alistair had mentioned sat apart from the main house, a small but well-built structure with its own garden plot and a view of the surrounding countryside. "It is not much," Alistair said as he helped Farah down from the wagon. "But it is honest land, and it has been in my family for 3 generations." "It is more than I expected," Farah said quietly. She was looking at the cottage with an expression he could not quite read. He showed her inside. The cottage had a main room with a fireplace, a small sleeping area separated by a curtain, and a table with 2 chairs. Dust covered everything and cobwebs hung in the corners, but the structure was sound. "I will help you clean it up," Alistair offered. "Get it livable again." "No," Farah said firmly. "I will do it myself. I need—" She paused, searching for words. "I need to make this space my own. Do you understand? I do." He left her with cleaning supplies, fresh linens, and a promise to bring dinner later. As he walked back to the main house, he found himself wondering what exactly he had gotten himself into. Bringing an orc woman to work his farm was one thing. Bringing someone who had clearly been through trauma, who flinched at unexpected movements and slept in a wagon bed rather than risk the vulnerability of resting, that was something else entirely. But he had given his word, and Alistair Owens was a man who kept his promises. That evening he prepared a simple but hearty meal: thick stew with vegetables from his root cellar, fresh bread, and berry preserves. He loaded it all onto a tray and carried it to the cottage, knocking gently on the doorframe since the door stood open. "Farah, I brought dinner." She appeared from behind the curtain, and he was startled by the transformation. She had washed, scrubbing away the grime of captivity, and her black hair was still damp but neatly braided. The rags she had been wearing were gone, replaced by a simple shift he recognized as having belonged to his hired man. She must have found it in the cottage. "Thank you," she said, taking the tray. "You did not have to do this." "Part of our agreement," he reminded her. "All meals included." "Still, I'm not accustomed to—" She trailed off, then seemed to gather herself. "Would you like to sit? There are 2 chairs, and I feel strange eating while you stand there." They sat across from each other at the small table, and for a while the only sound was eating. Farah consumed the food with the efficiency of someone who had gone too long without a proper meal, and Alistair found himself wanting to ask about how she had ended up in that cage, but knowing it was too soon, too raw. "This is good," Farah said finally. "You cook well for a human man." "I cook well for anyone," he replied with a slight smile. 10 years in the army teaches you to make decent food from whatever you have on hand. You were a soldier. It was not a question. Scout and infantryman. "I served along the northern border mostly." Her expression shuddered. "Then you fought against my people." "I fought in a war that should never have happened," Alistair said carefully. "I followed orders I disagreed with and saw good people on both sides die for reasons that made less sense every year. When my term ended, I came home and swore I would never pick up a sword again unless it was to defend my own land." "Do you regret it? Fighting, I mean." "Every day." The honesty came easily. "But I cannot change the past. I can only try to do better in the present." Farah studied him across the table, and he felt the weight of her assessment. Whatever she saw seemed to satisfy her because she nodded slowly. "My clan would kill me for sitting here with you," she said. "Breaking bread with a human soldier would be seen as the ultimate betrayal." "Why did you leave your clan?" "I did not leave. They sold me." The words were flat, emotionless. "I refused to marry the chieftain's son. He was cruel, and I would not submit to cruelty just to keep clan peace. So his father declared me outcast and sold me to slavers. Better to profit from my stubbornness than let me die free, I suppose." Anger flared hot in Alistair's chest. "That is unconscionable. That is survival." Farah shrugged, but he saw the pain beneath the gesture. "Orc clans survive by being strong, and strength is measured in obedience to the chieftain. I was weak because I would not bend. Refusing cruelty is not weakness, it is the opposite." She looked at him with something like wonder. "You truly believe that?" "I do." They finished the meal in more comfortable silence, and when Alistair gathered the empty dishes, Farah walked him to the door. "Tomorrow we start work," she asked, "if you are ready. But if you need more time to rest, to heal, I am ready." Her voice was firm. "Idle hands make for dark thoughts, and I have had enough darkness for a lifetime." "Then tomorrow we start," he agreed. "I will come get you at dawn." He was halfway back to the main house when he heard her call out. "Alistair," he turned. She stood silhouetted in the doorway of the cottage, the lamplight from inside casting her in warm gold. "Thank you," she said. "Not just for the food, for seeing me, as a person, I mean." His throat tightened. "You are welcome, Farah." The next weeks fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal, though Alistair knew there was nothing normal about it. They worked side by side from dawn until dusk, and Farah proved to be everything he had hoped and more. She was strong, tireless, and quick to learn. What she did not know about farming, she made up for with determination and intelligence. They prepared the fields for planting, repaired fences that had fallen into disrepair, and tended to the animals. Farah had a gentle touch with the goats, surprising him with her patience, and the chickens seemed to actually like her despite her initial uncertainty around them. "I have never understood chickens," she admitted one afternoon as they collected eggs. "They are chaotic creatures with no sense of order." "That is what makes them chickens," Alistair replied, amused. "If they made sense, they would be something else entirely." She laughed at that, a real laugh, deep and genuine, and he realized it was the first time he had heard her make that sound. It changed her entire face, softening the hard edges that captivity had carved into her features. They talked while they worked, sharing stories in small doses. Farah spoke of growing up in the northern clans, of learning to hunt and fight alongside her brothers, of a childhood that sounded harsh, but not without moments of joy. Alistair told her about his family's farm, about his decision to serve in the army because he thought it was the right thing to do, about coming home to find his parents had passed and left him everything. "You get lonely?" Farah asked one evening as they washed up after a particularly dirty day of mucking out the goat pen. "Living here alone, I mean." "Sometimes," he admitted. "But I have learned that being alone and being lonely are not always the same thing. I have my work, my land, my animals. It is enough." "Is it, though?" She looked at him with those perceptive amber eyes. "Or is it just what you tell yourself so you do not have to face the truth?" "And what truth is that? That you are hiding out here because you saw too much ugliness in the world and you do not trust yourself to go back into it?" The observation hit harder than any physical blow could have. Alistair stopped washing his hands and gripped the edge of the water barrel. "Maybe," he said quietly, "or maybe I just finally learned where I actually belong. Maybe both things can be true." He looked at her and found understanding in her expression, not judgment. She knew what it was like to carry wounds that did not show on the surface. "What about you?" he asked. "Do you get lonely in the cottage?" "I got lonely in a crowded clan full of people I had known my whole life," Farah replied. "Being alone is different, quieter, but not worse." As spring shifted toward summer, something began to change between them. It was subtle at first, a hand lingering a moment too long when passing tools, eyes meeting across the fields and holding, an awareness that seemed to fill the air like electricity before a storm. Alistair tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the work and nothing else. But it was becoming impossible to ignore how his heart would speed up when Farah smiled, or how protective he felt when she winced from old injuries, or how much he looked forward to their evening conversations over dinner. This was dangerous territory. She worked for him. She depended on him. Acting on any attraction would be an abuse of the power dynamic between them, no matter how much he might want otherwise. But then came the night when everything shifted. A severe storm rolled in without warning, the kind that turned the sky green and sent animals running for shelter. Alistair was securing the barn doors when he saw Farah sprinting across the yard toward the cottage, rain already pelting down in sheets. Lightning cracked so close he felt it in his teeth, and the boom of thunder that followed shook the ground. He saw Farah stumble and fall, saw her try to get up and fall again. Without thinking, he ran to her. "Are you hurt?" He had to shout over the wind. "My ankle," she gasped. "I twisted it." He helped her up, supporting her weight, but the cottage was too far. Another lightning strike, closer this time, and the tree between them and the cottage exploded in a shower of sparks and splintering wood. "Main house," Alistair shouted. "Now!" They made it inside just as hail began to fall, ice stones the size of walnuts hammering against the roof and windows. Alistair helped Farah to a chair by the fireplace and immediately knelt to examine her ankle. "Can you move it?" he asked, his hands gentle as he felt for breaks. "Yes, but it hurts." She was shivering, soaked through, and he realized he was too. "Not broken, I think. Sprained." "I will wrap it, but first we need to get out of these wet clothes before we catch a chill." He fetched dry clothing for both of them, a shirt and trousers that would be too large for her but better than nothing, and turned his back to give her privacy as they changed. When he turned around again, she was wrapped in a blanket on the chair, her wet hair hanging loose around her shoulders. She looked younger like this, vulnerable, beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. He wrapped her ankle with practiced efficiency, then built up the fire until warmth began to chase away the chill. The storm raged outside, but inside it felt safe, intimate. "Thank you," Farah said softly, "for coming after me. Of course I came after you." He sat down in the other chair, suddenly aware that this was the first time she had been inside his home. "Did you think I would leave you out there?" "I do not know what to think when it comes to you, Alistair Owens." She pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "You confuse me." "You have from the beginning." "How so?" "You are kind when you have no reason to be. You treat me with respect I have not earned. You look at me like I am." She paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "Like I am worth something. You are worth something," he said firmly. "You are worth a great deal, Farah." "Why?" The question came out almost desperate. "Why do you see value in me when my own people did not? When humans everywhere else see only a monster?" Alistair leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and chose his words with care. "I see value in you because you are valuable. Not because of what you can do for me or what you might become, but because of who you are right now. You are brave and strong and honest. You work hard not just because I pay you, but because you take pride in doing things well. You are gentle with animals and stubborn with yourself, and you have survived things that would have broken most people. That is who I see when I look at you." Tears were streaming down her face now, silent and steady. "No one has ever said things like that to me before. Then they were fools." She laughed through her tears, a broken, beautiful sound. "You are the fool, Alistair, caring about an orc woman. Do you not know how this will look to others, what they will say about you?" "I stopped caring what others think a long time ago." He held her gaze. "The only opinion that matters is yours." "Mine." "Yes. Do you think I am a fool for caring about you?" She was quiet for a long moment, firelight dancing across her features. Outside, the storm continued its assault, but inside there was only stillness and possibility. "No," she whispered finally. "I think you are the first person who has ever truly seen me, and I think—" She took a shaky breath. "I think I care about you too, more than I should, more than is wise." "Why is it not wise?" "Because I am orc and you are human. Because the world will never accept us. Because caring about you means risking my heart after I have worked so hard to protect it." Alistair stood and moved to kneel in front of her chair, eye level with her now. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he reached up and brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "I cannot promise the world will accept us," he said quietly. "But I can promise that I will never stop seeing you, valuing you, or caring about what happens to you. And if you want to protect your heart, I understand, but if you are willing to risk it." He paused, his own heart hammering. "I would consider it an honor to protect it for you. Alistair." His name on her lips was a prayer and a question and an answer all at once. "May I kiss you?" he asked. "If you do not want." She pulled him forward by his shirt, closing the distance between them, and kissed him with a fierceness that stole his breath. Her lips were warm and soft despite her tusks, and she tasted like rainwater and possibility. He cupped her face gently, mindful of her strength but matching her intensity with his own, and felt years of loneliness and guarded hope finally break open into something real. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Farah rested her forehead against his. "I have never kissed anyone before," she admitted. Was I?" "Perfect," he assured her. "You were perfect." They spent the rest of the storm talking and kissing and learning the geography of each other's hearts. Farah told him about the scars on her arms and back, about the things she had endured in captivity that she had not been ready to share before. Alistair told her about the nightmares he still had from the war, about the guilt he carried for surviving when so many had not. They fell asleep in the chairs as the storm finally exhausted itself, hands clasped between them, the fire burning low. When morning came, everything was washed clean. The world outside sparkled with raindrops and fresh growth, and inside the farmhouse, two people who had been alone too long woke to find they were alone no longer. The following months were the happiest of Alistair's life. He and Farah worked the farm together, and what had once been a burden felt like joy when shared. They planted and tended and harvested, their rhythms synchronized through growing familiarity and affection. In the evenings, Farah would cook dinner in the main house she had moved in gradually, naturally, until the cottage sat empty and unused. They would eat and talk and plan for the future. The future. It was something Alistair had stopped believing in, but now it stretched before him full of possibility. Not that everything was easy. They faced challenges from the outside world with frustrating regularity. When they went to town for supplies, people would stare and whisper. The shopkeeper served them but made his disapproval clear. Children threw rocks at Farah until Alistair stepped between them, his old soldiers authority enough to send them scattering. "We could go elsewhere," Farah said as they drove home from one particularly unpleasant trip. "Somewhere people do not know us. Or we could stay and show them that their prejudice has no power over us," Alistair countered. "We have done nothing wrong. Our love is not something to hide or be ashamed of." "Love," Farah repeated softly. "You have never said that word before." He pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her fully. "I love you, Farah Forge. I should have said it sooner, but I wanted to be certain you would believe me when I did." Her eyes shimmered. "I believe you. And I love you too, Alistair Owens, even though I am terrified of what that means." "Me too," he admitted. "But I have learned that the things worth having are usually the things that scare us most." That winter, as snow blanketed the farm and work slowed to maintenance rather than constant labor, Alistair began planning. He had been thinking about it for weeks, turning the idea over in his mind like a precious stone, examining it from every angle. On the longest night of the year, he prepared a special dinner. Roasted chicken, winter vegetables cooked with herbs, fresh bread, and a bottle of wine he had been saving for years without knowing what he was saving it for. He set the table with his mother's good dishes and lit candles until the room glowed warm and golden. Farah noticed immediately when she came in from checking on the animals. "What is all this?" "Sit," he said, pulling out her chair. "I want to do something special for you." They ate and talked and laughed, and Alistair felt his nervousness growing with each passing moment. Finally, as they were finishing the meal, he stood and moved around the table to kneel beside her chair. "Alistair," her voice was uncertain, "what are you doing?" "Something I have wanted to do for months but was too afraid to attempt." He took her hand, calloused and strong, and held it between both of his. "Farah, these past months with you have been the best of my life. You have brought light and laughter and purpose to days that used to feel empty. You have taught me that love is not about perfection, but about choosing each other even when things are difficult. You are my partner, my best friend, and the person I want to wake up beside for the rest of my life." Her free hand had come up to cover her mouth, tears already forming. "I know the world will not make this easy for us," he continued. "I know there will be people who judge us and reject us and try to tear us apart. But I also know that I would rather face all of that with you than face a single day of comfort without you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring, simple silver with a small emerald that reminded him of her skin in sunlight. "Will you marry me, Farah? Will you be my wife, my family, my future?" She was crying in earnest now, but she was also smiling, and when she spoke her voice was steady and sure. "Yes. Yes, Alistair, I will marry you. I will be all of those things and more, for as long as you will have me." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Thank the gods, and then she was pulling him up, kissing him with joy and passion and promises unspoken. They held each other in the candlelight, two souls who had been broken in different ways but had found healing in union. They married in spring, exactly 1 year after the day Alistair had bought Farah's freedom. There was no grand ceremony, no crowd of well-wishers. Just the two of them, a traveling priest who asked no questions and offered no judgment, and the open land as their witness. Alistair wore his best clothes, simple but well-made. Farah wore a dress they had commissioned from the one seamstress in town willing to serve them deep green to complement her skin, with embroidery around the collar and cuffs that echoed traditional Orc patterns. "You look beautiful," Alistair said when he saw her, and meant it with his whole heart. "You look handsome," she replied, adjusting his collar with a tender smile. "Are you ready for this? There is still time to change your mind." "I have never been more ready for anything in my life." The priest spoke the words of binding, of commitment and partnership and love that endured beyond reason. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, Alistair promising to honor her strength and cherish her gentleness, Farah promising to share his burdens and celebrate his joys. When the priest declared them married, Alistair kissed his wife with all the emotion swelling in his chest. This woman who had been caged and mocked, who had been called monster and slave, was now his partner in all things. The bidders had laughed at her chains. He had paid for her freedom. But what had grown between them was something neither money nor malice could ever buy or break. They celebrated with a feast they had prepared together: roasted meats and fresh vegetables, pies made with berries they had picked themselves, and wine that tasted sweeter for being shared. As the sun set on their wedding day, they sat on the porch of their farmhouse, Farah's head resting on Alistair's shoulder, and watched the sky turn colors they did not have names for. "You regret it?" Farah asked quietly. "Tying yourself to someone the world will always see as less than?" "The world is wrong," Alistair said simply. "And I have never been happier to stand against the world than I am right now with you." She lifted her head to look at him, and in her eyes he saw love and wonder and the fierce determination that had first drawn him to her. "I was in that cage for 3 months, she said. 3 months of believing I would die there, forgotten and alone. And then you came. You saw me when everyone else saw a thing. You freed me when you could have used me. You loved me when the world said it was impossible." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "I do not believe in fate, Alistair, but I believe in this. I believe in us." "So do I," he replied, "for all the days we are given and beyond." As darkness fell and stars began to emerge, they went inside together. The farmhouse that had been empty for so long was now a home, filled with laughter and warmth, and the promise of a future built on love that had grown from the ashes of despair. The years that followed were not without hardship. They faced prejudice and isolation, seasons that tested their resolve and their resources. But they faced everything together, and that made all the difference. Farah became known in their region as an exceptional farmer and healer, her knowledge of traditional orc medicine proving invaluable to both animals and people. Alistair expanded their operations, and slowly, grudgingly, the community began to accept them, or at least tolerate their presence. Children who had once thrown rocks came to apprentice in the fields. Women who had crossed the street to avoid Farah began to seek her advice about difficult births and stubborn illnesses. The shopkeeper who had served them with disgust eventually hired Farah to help during harvest season when he needed extra hands. It was not perfect acceptance. There were still people who spat when they passed, still voices raised in anger about the abomination of a human-orc union. But there were also unexpected allies, and with each passing season, the balance shifted incrementally toward acceptance. 3 years after their wedding, Farah told Alistair she was pregnant. He wept with joy and fear, knowing the world would be even harder on a child of mixed heritage than it had been on them. But Farah was fierce in her determination that their child would grow up loved and safe and proud of both halves of their heritage. Their daughter was born on a summer morning, arriving with the dawn and a cry that Alistair swore could be heard across the entire valley. She had her mother's green-tinted skin, a lighter jade shade, and her father's brown eyes. Tiny tusks were barely visible when she yawned, and pointed ears poked through dark hair. "She is perfect," Farah whispered, exhausted and radiant as she held their daughter. "Absolutely perfect. What should we name her?" Alistair asked, running a gentle finger down his daughter's impossibly soft cheek. "I was thinking Hope," Farah said, "because she is proof that hope can grow in even the darkest soil." "Hope Owens," Alistair tested, then, seeing Farah's expression, amended, "or Hope Forge Owens." "Equal parts both of us." "Perfect," Farah agreed. As Alistair watched his wife cradle their daughter in the home they had built together, on the land they had cultivated with their own hands, he thought back to that day in the marketplace. The day he had seen a woman in chains and decided to do something about it. He had paid 20 silver coins that day, 20 pieces of metal that had seemed like a fortune at the time. But what he had truly bought was not a farmhand or a servant. He had bought a chance, a single opportunity to do the right thing when the world was doing wrong, and that chance had grown into this: a wife he loved with every fiber of his being, a daughter who represented a future where human and orc might live together in peace. A home filled with laughter and purpose, and the kind of happiness that came from building something meaningful against all odds. The bidders had laughed at the caged orc woman's chains. They had mocked her dignity and dismissed her worth. But Alistair had seen what they could not or would not see, that inside those chains was not a beast or a monster, but a person. Someone strong and brave and beautiful who deserved a chance at freedom, at life, at love. He had paid in full for that chance. And then he had unlocked her chains himself, knowing that true freedom could not be bought or sold, only offered and accepted. What had grown from that moment was more than either of them could have imagined. It was proof that love could transcend boundaries the world insisted were uncrossable. that two people from different worlds could create their own world together. That kindness offered in a moment of darkness could light the way to a lifetime of joy. As summer turned to autumn and their daughter grew, as the farm prospered and their love deepened with each passing day, Alistair and Farah Forge Owens lived the truth they had always known, that they were stronger together than apart, that their love was worth fighting for, and that sometimes the best thing a person could do was unlock chains both literal and metaphorical and offer freedom to someone who needed it desperately. And in doing so, they had freed themselves.